Hi guys, today we're going to be taking a look at chapter 2, and again, make sure that you're paying attention to which chapters go with each other. There are multiple weeks where we're going to be covering several chapters at a time. They don't tend to be too terribly long, and quite frankly, there are more chapters in the book than there are weeks in the semester, so we do need to double them up on occasion. So, chapter 2, we're going to be taking a look at other European countries that show up in North America. Now, we mentioned back in chapter 1, the Treaty of Tordesillas is where the Pope gets a map of the world, draws a line down it, and says, Spain, you get this part of the world, Portugal, you get that part of the world. Everyone else is kind of out of luck. So you can imagine other European countries aren't a big fan of that, and they completely ignore that and start exploring. A couple reasons why they're willing to ignore the Pope. One, they want wealth, they want fame, they want fortune, they want to have a slice of this new world, so they're just willing to ignore the Pope. The other reason you see European countries doing this is, quite frankly, not every country in Europe by this point in time is Catholic, right? So Protestant England doesn't care what the Pope said. Protestant Netherlands doesn't care what the Pope said, right? So again, they're willing to kind of ignore these edicts being published by the Pope, and we start to see more countries show up in North America. Chapter 2 kind of breaks this down by country. First country they take a look at is France. Again, what you see, France is kind of exploring a different part, right? We see Spain in the Caribbean region, Mexico, southern U.S., what's going to become the southern U.S. France is going to go way up into the Canada region in North America, right? And they're a little bit different, right? Obviously, their goal is to find gold. There's not going to be any gold found up there, but what they do find is a country that is abundant in natural resources, right? Timber, fishing, and specifically the beaver. Back in Europe, the major craze was to have a beaver-skinned hat. It looks beautiful and it keeps your head warm, and everyone in Europe that had money wanted one of those. Well, the easiest way to find those was in North America. So again, you have these hunter fur trappers showing up, getting these animals and sending them back. So again, that's kind of their gold, if you will. You have people like Samuel de Champlain. Lake Champlain in New York would be named after him, who's going to explore the St. Lawrence River into places like Quebec and Montreal, eventually end up in the Great Lakes. We see the founding of the city of Detroit. So again, you see all of this kind of French exploration kind of following the St. Lawrence River and then up into the Great Lakes as well, which is why you see many kind of French named things along that region. Again, I mentioned Detroit, which is kind of French for the city of straits. So again, the Detroit River there Detroit is on the river there that separates Lake Huron from Lake Erie, thus getting that name. All right, we obviously mentioned the Spanish were already in America by this point in time, but again, they're beginning to spread out. Again, we see them conquering the Aztecs in what would be central Mexico. We're going to start to see them getting into what was going to become the southwestern U.S. So again, exploring places like New Mexico, founding the city of Santa Fe. Some of what they're doing there is simply looking for more gold. And there's kind of this fabled city called El Dorado that's supposed to be made of gold. It doesn't really exist, but you see lots of Spanish explorers getting into kind of the heartland of America, all the way into places like Kansas, is getting kind of these interactions between these conquistadors and native tribes and all of these different things, exploring up the coast of California. And what you see with Spain is they tended to set up a lot of missionaries. So again, places where they could kind of have priests that could kind of watch over the area, spread Christianity, and kind of work as a military base for these conquistadors. The most famous of these becomes the Alamo, which obviously is also famous in American history as well. All right, then we start to see England getting in on the scene. We mentioned that many of these countries that start exploring are completely ignoring that the world is only supposed to be divided between Spain and Portugal, and obviously England is one of those. Going back to the 1530s, where you see Henry VIII separating England from the church, of the Catholic Church, right? And again, they eventually go the Protestant route. So again, first off, they don't really care what the Pope has to say, and secondly, they look at a lot of these Catholic countries as their enemy. Catholic France, Catholic Spain. So again, this is a rivalry. This certainly is not a friendly, hey, you take that part of the world, and I'll take this part of the world. It's really kind of an attacking thing. And we really see this with Elizabeth I, who sanctions a lot of piracy. While we kind of think of England as a very powerful navy, that wasn't necessarily the case at exactly this point in time. They don't have a military of England that can kind of match up with these other military powers of the world. But they do have lots of ships. And basically, Elizabeth I says, hey, if you're a pirate and you want to go rob a Spanish ship, You're not allowed to do that. Wink. But go ahead and turn any gold you get over to the government and we'll reward you for that. So you start to see this age of piracy. So again, kind of not quite Pirates of the Caribbean-esque as far as the timeline goes, but it's getting a lot closer to that, where you have these English ships kind of raiding the Caribbean and attacking all of these Spanish ships laden down with gold from the New World. And this really allows England to finance itself. Now again, if you're Spain, this doesn't make you very happy. And in 1588, they actually send an armada to crush the English. They're going to invade the country and teach those Protestants a lesson. Except the armada doesn't do very well. They're incredibly large, unmaneuverable ships, and the English have smaller, faster ships, and they're able to literally just run circles around the Spanish armada and sink most of the ships. And it doesn't help that a major storm kind of separates the armada. A lot of the ships are wrecked. And again, Spain kind of loses a little bit of that prestige, kind of going from the #1 military power in Europe to going, yeah, maybe they're not so great. Again, they don't control the seas. We're going to see England start to take that kind of mantle from them. But this is really going to open up England now for further expansion, right? Now they can genuinely send exploration as a country because Spain really doesn't have the ability to stop them. And that's where you're obviously going to get into things like Jamestown, which again is the first English colony here in America, the first English settlement. Now, one of the things that allows this exploration like Jamestown to exist is something called a joint stock company. Again, let's say you're an extremely wealthy person and you think there's gold in the real world. So you shell out $1 million and build ships and get a crew and sell them, and they all sink. You just lost $1 million. Right? That's in the negative. You're not getting any of that money back. But let's say you can get a lot of wealthy friends, 10 of them, and each of you throws in $100,000. You still have $1 million. You still got the exact same number of ships, you still have the exact same crew, but when those ships sink or they disappear, you only lost $100,000. That's a lot more palatable. That's the idea of a joint stock company. You pull your resources together to be able to finance these trips, and you're basically financing your losses, right? You're never losing an entire amount of money. You're losing a portion of that particular money. So again, we start to see these European, specifically in England, these joint stock companies funding exploration. Again, the government doesn't have to worry about losing money. It's private citizens. They just ask the government for permission. Hey, mind if we set up a colony here? The crown says, yep, go for it. You get a bunch of rich people that pull the resources. The ship goes over. And again, let's say they turn a profit. Let's say they make a bunch of money. They find gold. They grow tobacco. Then they come back and repay the investors, right? So again, it's looked at as an investment, and that's really how England is going to colonize America. Again, different than Spain. Spain is doing this all being ran by the government. There are lots of rewards there. If you do find gold, the government can get rich. But there's lots of problems there because if the gold gets lost, your ships get sunk, the government is what loses money. So again, we have different approaches here by different countries in Europe. Now, obviously, the story of Jamestown, we kind of know it ties in with Pocahontas and all these different kinds of things. But again, Jamestown is a miserable existence. It's extremely hard to grow food there originally. People are starving to death. Again, a very small portion of the people that originally show up actually survive. You have hostile interactions with the natives. So again, this is not a glamorous experience. People are not getting rich. They went there expecting to literally just pull gold out of the rivers and everyone was going to get rich and it's not going to be a big deal. And that's not the case, right? It's a very hard scrabble life. People are barely surviving. In fact, almost everyone had packed up and was getting ready to leave when another ship full of kind of new recruits show up. They get everyone to stay. They do get it a little bit more organized. They are able to grow their own food. They do make a peace with the natives. And again, obviously, Jamestown is going to exist going forward. But again, this is an incredibly difficult situation here in America they find themselves in. Now, I mentioned there are other European countries involved in this as well. Your book takes a look at the Netherlands. Again, the Netherlands had broken off from Spain. They're Protestant. They actually found what they call New Amsterdam, which is going to be our New York. Again, they set up kind of trading posts all along the Hudson River Valley, which goes kind of north into the state of New York. And again, if you ever go there today, you find lots of Dutch names, Dutch influence, all of those different things. And again, obviously, eventually, the English are going to take New Amsterdam, and we know that it gets called New York. Sweden is also a player during this period in time, not nearly as much as the other countries, but again, they're kind of at their peak of military power in Europe at the end of the 30 Years' War. So they say, hey, let's do some exploring ourselves. And they kind of set up a base in the Delaware River area, so kind of like Philadelphia, north into Delaware, Wilmington, that region of what's going to become America. They're not there long. They kind of have some conflicts with the English, the Dutch. But again, you do see some Swedish influences in those areas as far as names of places and things of that nature. Obviously, you're going to continue to see conflict with Native Americans as Europeans show up, as they kind of take this land, as they buy the land, all of these different aspects, you start to see more and more conflicts. And one of the things you see as people push into the New England area, as people get into kind of the New York area, is that they're going to come into contact with the Iroquois. Now, the Iroquois have a group called the Iroquois Confederacy, which is 5 specific tribes that kind of span the state of New York, from kind of the Hudson River all the way over to the kind of Lake Erie, Lake Ontario region. And again, this is a group of tribes that work together for common goals. They're militarily strong. So again, these are the groups that these Europeans are going to be interacting with, that they're going to have this conflict with, that they specifically need to become friends with going forward. And that's a lot of what we see here in Chapter 2, are those interactions between the natives and Europeans as they arrive. So again, just a reminder, make sure that you're doing your weekly quizzes and discussions, and have a great day.